Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really complex, definitely politically charged, and honestly, deeply emotional. It's the world of non-speaking individuals who are finding their voice.
Yeah, and our sources paint this incredibly stark picture. You've got this simple tool, a letterboard, right? And it's described as both the greatest hope for a family.
And at the same time, the sharpest weapon used against them by institutions. It's quite the contrast.
It really is. We're looking at sources that detail these, well, often painful stories. Parents, facilitators, they truly believe their non-speaking kids, often autistic kids, are communicating complex, independent thoughts.
Through spelling methods, yeah. But that belief just slams head-on into, well, decades of skepticism and huge institutional barriers.
Exactly. The sources lay out this fight pretty clearly. For the spellers and families, it's about autonomy. It's about dignity, education, basic rights, really.
But then you look at the other side, the professional groups, the established systems, fighting against these methods. And the sources suggest, it's about money, existing systems, and maybe the massive implications of admitting they got something wrong for a long time.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack this whole thing, the history, where the stigma came from, the role of these professional gatekeepers, the science that often gets ignored, how the methods evolved, and then, this is where it gets really wild, claims of telepathy.
Telepathy and spiritual gifts, yeah, which apparently are being suppressed even within the communities that support spelling.
It's a lot to cover.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the first big wall people hit,
Yeah.
the institutional roadblocks, the fight just to be heard.
It often starts with just flat-out denial. We have this really jarring story from a mom, Katie, about her son, Houston. Houston was already pretty far into high school when he finally started spelling complex thoughts.
Which must have been incredible for them.
Oh, absolutely. Katie was, over the moon. She calls his teacher over the summer, so excited to share this huge news.
And she gets hit with this immediate wall. The teacher just says, oh, we don't support that method. It has been discredited. Katie was just shocked.
Yeah.
It was instant dismissal. Shows how deeply embedded the bias was already.
Wow. And that bias, that institutional line, it really solidified at his IEP meeting, right? The Individualized Education Program meeting.
Yeah. She walks in and she says the room had triple the number of people who would normally be there. Like they were lined up against her.
And the sources describe this one moment. The county's director of speech services
Leans forward very aggressively, the source says, points right at the letter stencil Katie brought.
and says, we don't believe in that. We don't support that. Just like that.
That's chilling. Katie apparently thought for a second, you don't support the alphabet?
Right. But no, the director clarified it wasn't the letters. It was the method. And their reason, ASHA, the American Speech Language Hearing Association.
Okay, so ASHA, big player here. They certify basically all of the speech pathologists in the U.S., and they put out warnings against these spelling methods.
Exactly. And the result for Houston, he only had a few months left of high school. Before spelling, they treated him like a toddler, basically.
Because they assumed incompetence.
Assumed total incompetence. Now he can communicate, but because of the ASJ stance, the school says, nope, he could only sit in one U.S. history class. That was it. His high school education just evaporated.
That's heartbreaking, just utterly devastating.
It's a terrible loss of potential, and it points to these barriers that seem almost illogical. We have a speech therapist, Maria, who points this out. Kids are forced to prove that they can use this letterboard independently before the school will even agree to teach them using it.
Wait, what? That makes no sense. You wouldn't tell a kid learning Spanish, prove you can speak Spanish before we teach you Spanish.
Exactly. You teach them the language, you give them the tools, but here the communication method itself is treated like some kind of privilege they have to earn, not a tool they need for basic access.
So the resistance is baked in, and that must put enormous pressure on the professionals who do want to help.
Oh, huge pressure, astronomical stakes.
There's this speech pathologist, Carrie, who teaches spelling but does it under the radar. She says behavior specialists literally threaten colleagues, like point blank, if you engage in facilitated communication, you will lose your license.
Okay, so that threat hangs on the term facilitated communication. We need to unpack that history because it seems key to why ASA is so resistant. There's a difference between the old method and what's often used now, right?
Yes, a crucial difference. The original method, facilitated communication, or FC, that utilized touch, the facilitator often had a hand on the speller's wrist, maybe their arm, for stabilization.
Got it. And the newer methods, SGC, RPM.
Spelling to communicate, rapid prompting method.
Yeah. One of their main rules is you don't touch them. It's about independent pointing.
But the stigma comes from FC days, back in the 90s.
Exactly. Built on, the sources say, outdated research, stigmas, and the long-held belief that non-speakers just aren't competent. And the real turning point was a few really high-profile, very damaging court cases involving FC, the touch-based method.
Where false accusations came out.
Yes. The sources mention a 1992 ABC News report about Aylin Wendrow, horrific abuse allegations typed out against her father via FC. But here's a critical detail that often gets glossed over: the facilitator's training. In that specific case, the facilitator had apparently had only 1 hour of unpaid training.
1 hour. That's nothing.
Barely anything. So you had these terrible situations, often with poorly or untrained people using a method requiring physical contact.
And instead of blaming the lack of training or regulation, the tool itself got condemned.
That's essentially what happened. Public opinion turned, institutions reacted, and the communication method got the blame, not the inadequate implementation.
And now ASHA, you're saying, has basically lumped the new non-touch methods, RPM and SGC, in with the old touch-based FC.
Correct. They issue these general warnings against all spelling methods. They're treating the non-touch, scientifically supported methods the same way as the discredited touch-based FC.
Like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly like that.
Okay, but there is counter-evidence, right? Evidence supporting the newer methods.
Oh, definitely. And this is where the institutional resistance seems particularly stubborn. Our sources say there are over 100 peer-reviewed studies confirming non-speakers authoring their own messages.
100 studies. And any specific proof, like physical proof.
Yeah, there's a really compelling University of Virginia study. They used eye tracking technology. They tracked the spellers' eye movements and their finger movements on the letterboard.
And what did they find?
Clear validation of independence. The eye went first to the letter, then the finger followed the eye. It shows the cognitive process. Look, identify, then point. Direct and independent.
The evidence is literally right there in front of their eyes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to move the needle for the institutions.
Apparently not enough, but then you have these incredible personal stories. Like Libby, she's a speech pathologist herself, an ASHA member, and her son, John Paul, starts spelling.
So she's living this contradiction. Profession says one thing, her son proves another.
Completely. And John Paul didn't just spell basic things. He got into age-appropriate academics, became quite the poet, apparently. He even showed knowledge of other languages Libby herself didn't know.
Wow. So that rules out facilitator influence right there.
You'd think so. For Libby, it was this moment of realizing the depth of the mind that had been hidden. The humor, the vocabulary, it was all there, just trapped behind motor planning issues.
It really underscores the competence that was just being completely overlooked. Now, you said the newer methods are non-touch, but let's circle back slightly. Sometimes, even with RPM or SGC, some minimal physical contact is needed. That sounds confusing.
It does, but there's a reason, often linked to proprioception. Remember Carrie, the speech pathologist? She explains that some autistic individuals have trouble knowing where their body is in space.
Like that internal sense of where your limbs are.
Exactly. If you can't feel your arm accurately, how do you aim precisely at a small letter? It's like trying to type when your arm's asleep.
Okay, that makes sense. So the touch isn't about guiding the finger to the letter.
No, it's about grounding the body, giving sensory feedback so they can initiate the movement themselves. The sources give examples like slight backward pressure on the arm just so they have something to push against, or maybe just a finger on the shoulder.
Just enough input to help them feel their body.
Right. One parent even mentioned needing to gently grab a strand of hair. Just enough sensory input for her child to feel centered and start spelling. Libby used this kind of light physical prompt initially to get John Paul to what she called an elevated place of spelling, after which he could type completely independently.
So it's a temporary scaffold, not facilitation in the old sense.
A scaffold to ground the body, exactly, so the mind can do its work.
Okay. And this need for grounding, for connection, and it sort of leads us into the most controversial territory in the sources, doesn't it? Stuff the community itself seems hesitant about.
Yeah, this is where we get into claims about spiritual gifts, about telepathy, existing sometimes with or without spelling.
Like they're without spelling, okay.
So,
Tell me more.
we'll take this story from Caroline in Cornwall, England. Her son, Kyle, is 38, non-speaking. He communicates, apparently, quite powerfully through music and through lucid dreaming. She calls it dream bridging.
Dream bridging, okay. And music.
Yeah, he's highly musical. Written 2 albums, one called Beyond the Syntax, and he uses songs pragmatically too, like playing lyrics about food or drink when he needs something. Quick communication.
That's fascinating in itself.
Yeah.
But the dream bridging.
This is where it gets really extraordinary. There's this anecdote about the Ace of Spades dream. Caroline was dreaming normally. Kyle appeared in her dream lucidly, trying to give her an important message, but she wasn't in a state to remember it clearly.
Like a normal hazy dream.
Right. So to make her remember, Kyle apparently performed this very specific, bizarre action in the dream. He ripped an Ace of Spades playing card and held the piece right up to her eye.
Whoa. Why?
To shock her, basically. To jolt her into a lucid state within the dream so she'd actually retain the complex conversation they then had. And the next morning, at breakfast, the details were validated. She remembered the message.
That completely bypasses physical communication as we know it.
Yeah.
A direct mind-to-mind bridge mediated by the dream state.
Exactly. It's not about the letterboard at all. It's a different channel. And Caroline, when she cautiously put out feelers online about telepathy, she found other parents, teachers, people terrified to talk about it publicly for fear of losing their jobs or credibility.
So this isn't just one isolated story, but it's suppressed.
Heavily suppressed. Arthur Golden, a retired lawyer mentioned in the sources, tracked this back to the 90s. He says even early proponents of FAC, like at Syracuse University's Institute, knew hundreds of students were reporting telepathy, but they actively shut down discussion.
Well,
They were afraid it would destroy the credibility of facilitated communication. They wanted scientific acceptance within a materialistic framework, and telepathy just didn't fit.
so they gatekept the most profound part of this discovery, maybe. But what about today? Even with independent spellers, there's still this need for a partner nearby. How does that fit if it's not physical help?
Right. That's the paradox skeptics jump on. Why does an independent speller sometimes need their communication partner standing, say, 10 feet away? The explanation in the sources isn't physical. It's described as an energetic link.
An energetic link.
Yeah, or merging our energy together, joint attention. It helps the non-speaker ground their own energy, regulate themselves. One partner said, "I'm like a lightning rod." Another described it as helping the speller step into my neurology.
Okay, so the partner is like an energetic anchor, maybe, not a physical guide. But if there is this energetic or even telepathic connection, doesn't that raise the risk of unintentional influence again?
That's the critical danger zone. Marianne Harrington and others really emphasize this. If partners are unaware of this potential link, call it energetic, call it telepathic, they could unconsciously project their own thoughts or expectations onto the speller.
Without even meaning to.
Exactly. And Harrington says, it is dangerous not to tell everybody about this possibility. You have to be aware of it to guard against it.
So how do they guard against it? If you know this link might exist, how do you ensure you're not influencing the output?
They've developed these really meticulous techniques, almost like mental hygiene practices. Standing behind the speller is one removes any chance of accidental visual cues from the partner's face.
Makes sense. What else?
Engaging in deliberate self-distraction, like mentally singing "You Are My Sunshine" on repeat, or tapping a foot rhythmically. Anything to occupy their own mind.
Keep their own thoughts out of the channel, so to speak.
Precisely. Some partners, during homework, will deliberately think the wrong answer. If the question is 2 plus 2, they'll mentally repeat 7, 7, 7. Or just pick a random word the source mentions, one partner thinking pumpkin over and over and over until the speller finished.
Wow. That's intense mental discipline.
It really is. And it highlights this internal war parents are fighting. It's not just against Aishas and the external skeptics. It's also against their own people within the spelling community who act as gatekeepers, removing online posts about telepathy.
Why would they do that?
Fear. Fear that talking about the telepathy, the Ace of Spades stuff, will just give ammunition to the skeptics and damage the whole movement's fight for basic acceptance of the spelling itself.
So they're caught between sharing the full, maybe paradigm-shifting truth they're experiencing and the pragmatic need to get their kids basic communication access in a skeptical world.
It's an incredibly difficult position.
If we pull back, look at the bigger picture. The sources seem to suggest the real issue isn't really about the spelling technique anymore.
That's the implication. The core challenge might be that the messages coming through the spelling directly confront the dominant materialistic paradigm.
How so? What are they saying?
Well, the spellers often describe operating from a different level of consciousness, a major, macro, or third ring, they call it. From that perspective, they say, telepathy is actually the purest form of communication.
Purest how?
Unfiltered. No ego, no deception, no sarcasm, none of the layers conventional language adds. And their messages, often not about small personal things, they focus on big collective issues. Climate change, new scientific ideas, the nature of love, the idea that we're all one.
So accepting their communication isn't just about disability rights for them. It's about humanity getting access to this broader perspective.
That seems to be the view presented. It's a necessary step for kind of collective
It's
evolution.
a huge claim. And it brings us to a final, really provocative thought from the sources. It reframes the whole struggle.
Yeah.
They suggest that conventional language, the kind we're using now, operates in the first bandwidth. And for non-speakers, accessing even that first bandwidth requires immense motor planning, huge physical effort.
Right, because of their neurological challenges.
So what if forcing them down into our narrow field, making them struggle so hard just to use conventional language?
Yeah.
What if that makes them lose something of themselves? What if it restricts their access to that wider, maybe more natural field of consciousness where telepathy is the norm for them?
So the question becomes,
Yeah, what if we are the ones limited by our reliance on this first bandwidth? And maybe the real work isn't just getting them access to our mode, but us learning how to meet them in that wider field.
a profound challenge indeed, redefining competence, communication, maybe even consciousness itself.
A lot to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a complex and truly fascinating world.